Psychedelics.
Stepping into the world of psychedelics will certainly help rewire the neural pathways. A big piece of what needs to happen is that you have to change the relationship that you're having with your story. And a lot of times when a person when the trauma is unresolved, they just can't get out of, they can't do the rewiring on their own. And this is where the psychedelics do come in, and they can be really powerful. But there's a but here. It's not about just going into a psychedelic journey. You have to prep the brain, and you have to get the neural pathways ready to be able to open up and be able to start shifting. It doesn't just happen through a journey. So there has to be preparation for it, and then there has to be a lot of integration afterwards, because you come into those journeys and it is open.
There's a rite of passage. It takes wild courage.
Yes.
Wild.
Is there possibilities of forming miracles? I'm not talking about like walking on water, but like miracles within your own life.
Oh yeah.
Like, have you two perceived that? So what would be an example of a miracle?
There's so many. The first thing that comes to mind, and it wouldn't look like a miracle. My husband passed away very suddenly 8 years ago. And out of his death, which was a very difficult time for me, was the miracle of my rebirth and really finding myself at a much deeper level, and the miracle of the pain and what came through on the pain, with all the pain. Like it allowed me to fully step into my own power and to see myself and what I was capable of.
Yeah.
That was a miracle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss. First of all, I lost my brother almost 2 years ago now. And probably a lot of people listening and watching have experienced loss. And we're talking about trauma today. So when you talk about loss, like the T word, trauma, comes up. But I'm interested in, like, that word miracle is thrown around a lot in our society, in religious circles and stuff. And like, I haven't experienced any miracles. I mean, maybe it's a miracle that I'm sitting here, if you look at the numbers, depending on what you believe about just being a human and just being an American and just being, able to support ourselves and able to get up and have nice clothes and nice food. Maybe that's a miracle. But like a true miracle to me is like something that's so unexpected yet mysterious. So that's why I'm always, when someone talks about miracles, to explain.
Well, let's look at this. And it's so interesting because we're deadened to some obvious miracles. We're kind of deadened to it just because it's obvious. Sometimes we overlook it. So 0 to 9 months, you're in your mother's womb. What the fuck, dude? You grew hands and feet and this system here that we can't even, no matter how much science studies, define. The miraculousness of you. And you weren't even doing shit. It's not like you were looking at your hand and going, come on, hand, fingers, go. You were being done to. What is that? And then we're born. And suddenly we're like, all right, yeah, that's a miracle. But Billy, here's what I need you to be. Here's what I need you to do, Billy. Here's what I need you to cause. And then we forget that we're always being done to. And we just don't consciously connect and allow that divine intelligence to like keep letting us be done to. Mm-hmm. And when we get out of the way enough, I believe we can align. And that's when a lot of serendipity because I bet if we really looked, you have a lot of things in your life that you'd be like, it's just unexplainable. Like the odds are too vast to even explain. Like, how did that happen in that moment in time? Like, what?
Good and bad, by the way.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be amazing things. Sometimes, I think we've talked before, like, what if I took a left instead of a right? I just missed getting hit by the bus, sort of, right? Metaphorically speaking, in our life. And okay, sold. I'm a miracle sitting here.
But there's also the piece, right? Then Like, and the reason why this process is a year long, it's like you think about that 9-month gestation, but think about in 9 months, what happens to your neural pathways if you're choosing to work on your personal development and step into your body and step into yourself differently. It takes about 9 months for those miracles to happen and that transformation to happen in a way that's actually effortless, that you don't even, you're doing the work, but you don't even know it's happening. And that to me is the miracle of a process, is that all of a sudden you are different and you don't even know how you got there.
Yeah. I like that. The 9 months, it takes a long time. We talk about whether it's sports or stand-up comedy or acting. They talk, is it 21,000, 10,000 hours or whatever? There's a rule out there. I think Jerry Seinfeld talks a lot about this. There's like a rule. You need to do something for X amount of hours or X amount of times for it to become habit. Yeah. And it sounds like transforming yourself and creating your own miracles. It's not just something you're going to sit in one class or just watch our show today. It's a process. It's a learned behavior.
It's even more than a learned behavior. It's about an internal experience and actually feeling and stepping into yourself in a way that feels powerful and safe and elegant.
That's so well said, because I could tell you a million stories with my words, and they'd be useless if you didn't have an experience of your own, to have your own investigation, your own evidence that is so.
Right. Yeah. Like a frame of reference point, almost like something, a trampoline to bounce things off of.
Yeah, like say I said, hey, Billy, this happened to me and it's so great and you got to try this thing. And you're like, that sounds interesting. But if you just like take my word for it, and you start telling all your friends, this is so great, my friend said this thing and it's so great, it's useless without your embodiment of that experience. But say you go take what I said and you go, all right, I'm inspired. Yeah. Let me try this. Yeah. And then you go and you have this like, wow, it's real. And then you start telling people, then they're going to be like, what? Yeah. I want to understand that. Sure. Ripple effect.
Yeah,
sure.
It's about teaching implementation. And I think so many of us have the intellectual roadmap. You read all the books, you know what to do, but to actually execute and embody and live into it is very different than just understanding it up here. And until you can feel it, and that's really what we're guiding people to do, is to actually fully be in the experience, not just in their head.
Well, I'm excited for this conversation today for a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't know me that well. You know me well. I live like more in the literal, the black and white and the reality. And Ferrari is much more in the spiritual side, into the development side. And I don't even know what words to use, but sort of she's tapped into things in her life that I'm actually through this show, I'm starting to tap into it in my life. So I'm going to sort of I'm going to let you guys go out there, and then I'm going to be try to reel it back in for people like me watching. They're like, what the hell are they talking about? Yeah. So today, you're an expert on trauma. You've done a lot of work around trauma with coaching people and mentoring people. So I want to get to that word trauma. So number one, can you define it? Like, what is trauma? And number two, there's this idea of sort of fake trauma of people that have these things that happened in their past, but they're not really trauma versus real trauma. So what is trauma to you, first of all?
It's actually a really good question. Most people think that trauma is about an event, but trauma is the energy that gets locked in your body around real or perceived threat. So it explains why 10 people can have the same car accident and come out the other side of it with 10 different experiences. And what makes an event traumatic for one person and maybe not somebody else is how safe they felt going into the experience, how well they moved through the experience, do they have the capacity to defend themselves in the experience, and who was there to support them and make them feel safe in the aftermath of the experience.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so trauma is, it can be this small or this big, and it really just depends on a person's nervous system, and their level of resiliency. Right. So it's like, are you familiar with the ACE studies?
No.
Adverse Childhood Experience Studies. And they surveyed, now it's probably way over 20,000, but this is years ago when I was in school. They had surveyed probably 20,000 people, and they had a series of 10 questions. And the 10 questions were all about adverse childhood experiences. And the people that had a higher ACE score, so they had more adverse childhood experiences, they had more issues, more mental health issues, and more physical health issues in their adult life. And what's really behind that? So the question is why? And the why is because the stress on their bodies from childhood, okay, trauma, chronic stress, right, is also a form of trauma. That chronic stress kind of broke down their level of resiliency, right? So a child who grew up in a healthy home and had nurturing parents and learned how to make decisions on their own, and there wasn't some alcoholic parent like coming home and being abusive, and there wasn't a mom who was codependent with the alcoholic, those children that were more well-adjusted or grew up in a more nurturing environment tend to have they would score lower on the ACE studies, and they'd have less mental and physical health issues.
And when you say physical, this means
like disease, yeah,
cancers,
like heart disease, cancer, pain in their body, diabetes. I mean, you go down the list, it's all there.
And you use the term chronic stress.
So we have different kinds of traumas, right? We have acute, we have chronic, right? We have physical, we have emotional, we have all different kinds of traumas. And we call, if you have chronic stress throughout your childhood, abusive parents, you're neglected, you're physically abused, sexually, mental, whatever it is, that is considered trauma. So it's not necessarily about one event. It can be a series of one event after the other, or your day-to-day living. If your body is under chronic stress in an environment that's stressful, this would be the key thing, where you are not safe. That's considered trauma.
I think we see that play out in our society very often. I mean, when you talk to somebody that's, for lack of a better term, really screwed up, and you're like, why are you like this? Why, maybe they've been arrested or whatever it might be, why are you like this? And you do this well, Angela, you start tapping into their past, and you go right from maybe just after they were born, because I think I did some reading about trauma the last couple of days after, you accepted to come on the show. It's like, even when you're in your mother's womb, even when you're a little baby, and stuff that we can't remember and we can't perceive, if you were in really bad environments, maybe it's a war, maybe it's a husband abusing a mother, whatever it might be, and you don't even remember it, it can still manifest in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 80s.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is like wild.
Mm-hmm. It starts in utero. And if you have a mom who's stressed, that impacts how a baby will develop. Because think about, if the mom is under stress, right, there's all these stress hormones, there's cortisol, and all these stress hormones pumping into the body, the baby is going to be impacted. Yeah. So their ability to manage stress is different. Or something as simple as a baby pushing off the vaginal walls and having a normal birth is regulating for the nervous system. So a lot of times I worked early on in my career with eating disordered patients. And one of the, when we do an intake coming into the clinic, we'd always want to know what the birth situation was. Because if and there's a specific eating disorder called ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, and it's all sorts of sensory stuff.
Wow.
And every one of these ARFID kids would have had some sort of traumatic birth. The cords wrapped around their neck, or there was some emergency C-section or something. And so the evidence is there that clearly that a baby's nervous system is impacted very early on in development. Yeah, and we don't. The other thing too is we don't think a lot about like developmental trauma. Like if there's been a surgery when a child's a year old or 6 months, or any of these things. If they're, we think that babies don't really know, but they're so attuned to the environment. And so like if they're in an environment that early on where there's yelling and screaming, or their diapers are not being changed, all of that will impact, and that's considered trauma.
And let's look at something like this even, because back to that we all are sort of a miracle, we'll say, but we forgot we are. That we, from 0 to 9 months, as I was saying earlier, we somehow manifest this miraculous thing that we're residing in, right? We somehow like cause this thing. It's being done to us. And then we're born. But if we weren't sort of programmed, and it's nobody's fault because it's passed down, right? Your parents, their parents, it's ancestral stuff. So you don't really blame anyone. But if we were to just leave well enough alone, it would seem like we are already coded with how to handle emotions and things. But here's what happens. I have this whole like little story. Imagine there's little Billy. And little Billy is really upset, and he comes home and he's in a tantrum, trauma, he's upset. And typically we have the parents come in, and there's many different kinds, right? There's, I'm going to give you something to cry about if you don't stop it. Or there's, who did this to you? Let me go fix it. There's all of these ways of being. But ultimately there's this one subliminal message that Billy is getting the entire time. And that is, whatever it is that you're feeling, Billy, this is the wrong feeling and you need out. This is not a safe one. You need out of this experience. And now play that tape forward, and Billy becomes an adult and no longer knows how to process these natural human feelings, fear, anger, sadness. Because if we just allow and trust and feel safe in the body and discover what that is, the miraculous in us already knows how to process and cause expansion through these experiences. But instead, we leave the body, deflect, defend, and cause all kinds of quirky behaviors all the way up to, mass murderers and whatever you want, psychopaths.
So what is that parent supposed to do to little Billy? Just live in it?
I have a theory.
Go ahead.
You want to hear it?
Yes, I do.
Well, I believe this could be possible if only we knew. It's like once you understand something, then you can alter how you're being with something. So very few of us have had enlightened parents. Did any of us here enlightened parents? Probably. Alexia, enlightened parents?
Still looking for some.
Wait, enlightened parent?
Enlightened parent.
Well adjusted. We can just even use it.
I'm being extreme because likely most people have not. And so imagine little Billy comes in, and an enlightened parent has an understanding that little Billy is safe. I don't need to cause you to be safe. I look at you and know that you are. So I'm gonna get a side conversation. When I'm in an airplane and there's turbulence, I'm looking for the flight attendants and I want to see their faces calm. Because if there is a slight panic in their face or concern, I'm going to freak out, okay? But the moment I see them relax, doing their, filling drinks, whatever, I'm like, okay, you're good. Right? So now little Billy, he is safe. He is safe. He might not understand that, but through a guardian that's reflecting that on him. Now, he might not be in the frequency to hear a conversation, but the energy, and imagine that energy is saying this if it had words. And it's just a cloaking, overarching, wrapping little Billy saying, I love you. You're so safe to feel this. You're so safe in here. And you can stay as long as you need. I'm going to be here loving you. That's what your energy's saying. And then suddenly, little Billy starts to tune to that. Oh, but our parents didn't know that.
They didn't understand that they're co-regulating their children. So it's exactly what you're saying. And when you understand that a parent's job is to co-regulate and make a child feel safe, that's their only job. They're not there to defend. They're not there to manage. They're there to be, like you're saying, to be attuned to a child and let them move through the experience. So I'm going to go into the science of this for a second. Yeah. So you ever see animals in the wild? They never get traumatized. Okay. Right. So why do animals in the wild not get traumatized and people do? Really simple. Animals have an innate ability to shake off their trauma and have what we call a biological completion and move on. So what are they doing? They are resetting their nervous system.
That's so brilliant, because I remember my dog we were walking down the hall, and this other dog started to get on. He started, bah, and my dog was like, whoa. And then I watched him do this whole process where he just like shook, like he was like startled by this dog. And then he shook, and then he started, doop, boop, bah, na, na, da, life is so good. Yeah,
So,
really.
We have a prefrontal cortex, so that actually, right, that's more sophisticated than the lower parts of the brain. And that overrides what the body's natural instinct is to do. Why do I feel this way? Why should this be, all the whys, right? But the truth is, if we let our child come home from that experience, and all we did was attune to the child, let them cry, right? Because how do we release trauma from the body? Heat, shaking, and tears. Let your kid cry.
Yeah.
Like, get over your own discomfort and let your kid cry, right? That's the attunement, is to let your kid do what they need to do to have that biological completion so the experience can be complete. When we don't have that biological experience, we never get it complete. And that's why, when you get to the scene of an accident, right? And the paramedics, somebody's shaking, and the paramedics are like holding the person down. I don't know if they still do this anymore, but they used to hold you down, right? Like, oh, maybe the person's convulsing. The person is just trying to regulate their nervous system.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We don't allow for that experience. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost like we have, the way I'm listening to you describe it with your example with the wild animals, we almost have a intelligence problem. Almost too much intelligence.
Right. Well, the prefrontal cortex overrides the more primitive parts of the brain that would allow for that.
And then also a sensitivity problem, and maybe that could be cultural, of this like helicopter parenting. I need to fix it. I need to do this. I need to be the best dad, the best mom, and just hands-on. When what I'm hearing you two say is more of a hands-off approach, and letting it happen.
Do you think cavemen got traumatized? Think about it. I bet the cavemen didn't get traumatized because they probably were having whatever biological completions they needed to have. Right? They didn't know any other way.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so I got to ask something. We're talking about in your mother's womb. We're talking about children, early trauma. I want to go back even earlier. And I wrote this down, and I've been reading about it, and I went down a little rabbit hole. It's super interesting. I don't know if it's true, but hopefully, Ilene, you can shed some light. So historical trauma or multi-generational trauma. These are major events that oppressed a people. Some of the examples are like the Holocaust, slavery, forced immigration, a lot of different things. Native Americans, right? Is that a thing? So in other words, like, okay, if I'm a little kid, if I'm a child that's born 20 years from now, and knock on wood, the war in Ukraine is over and everything's peaceful in that part of the world, but my mother and father were alive during the war, and then me, this person has a kid down the line, is that war, generations previous, going to affect his or her trauma? Like, is that even possible?
So, are you familiar with the term epigenetics?
No.
Epigenetics is basically what's in your genes and what gets passed along from generation to generation. And genes can get turned on and off. So if there's, and I don't know enough about it, so I know enough to be dangerous, but if you have, let's say you have anxious ancestors, and that's in your DNA. Okay, so that anxiety, let's just say that the chemical balance in you has more tendency that's passed down from generation to generation, right? And then you're in an environment where you're set up for situations that can create more anxiety. There's a chance that you're going to be more vulnerable to those things, like mental health issues. So it's in your DNA. It's like, so I'm Jewish. And I come from, my parents were first generation born, U.S. citizens, and lots of relatives were killed in the Holocaust.
Yeah. And
all of and you can see, I've been working my entire life on breaking some of these patterns and the fear, right? And I come from fearful parents, from fearful people, because it's generations back. Like, it's in their nature to, it's there. It's in there. It's in there. It's in there. It's in them at a cellular level that fear energy.
So it is passed on. You talk about your own family, the Holocaust.
It's absolutely passed on.
You think about African Americans with slavery. You think about a lot of the things that have happened throughout history. I like to go to, like you said, like science and like, what backs that up? That you as a Jewish woman sitting here in 2024 actually have something in your cells, in yourself, in your DNA that was passed down through your family via the Holocaust. I mean, I can't wrap my head around that.
I think there's characteristics. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal, but I think there's been, like, if you go and you look into the epigenetic research, I think the research is there. I think they've tested, there's markers, gene markers and stuff. I don't know enough but I know that there's been a lot of research on this, and the information and evidence is there that we do get passed down.
But let me intervene, because I know the science is like, all right, now I'm in science, so I'm in. But we can tap into let's just clear the slate here and tap into our own intuition. Now, for example, my father's side is Italian, and they had a lot of scarcity because they came with nothing. And so everything you save, you eat every last thing on your plate. What are you doing wasting that? It's like, so even though I wasn't an immigrant, it was past that way of being was shown to my father. And therefore, now imagine, let's go back to the animals, the baby cub and the mama bear. All they're doing really is watching. And then they start to go, oh, I see how you do that. Oh, I see how you do that. And so then they take that on, that way of being. And once it's my way of being, it's coded, right? It's a belief structure, no longer a thought, imprinted, no longer a thought. It's how I view the world. So now my father takes on you don't waste that thing. Money doesn't grow on trees. And now suddenly it's
I understand that.
Yeah.
We're talking about two different things. Okay. You're talking about, I hang out with Angela every day, and Angela eats very clean. Now all of a sudden I eat very clean. Then I have kids, and since they see me eat clean, they're going to eat clean, and their kids are going to eat clean, because I'm talking about inside, in our genetics, in our cells, in our soul, that something has happened to your family at a cellular level. Not something that's learned through observation, something that's really in our cells.
I see what you mean. Like you're born, it's fated, and you're born with that.
With the imprint of this trauma inside.
Well, I'm curious, like the root of your question, what are you trying to solve?
I think it's fascinating, because I think when bad shit that goes down in this world, we never have those conversations. Like, you're not only hurting the generation of people, or killing in some cases. Look at what's happening in Gaza and Israel and Ukraine right now. You're not only hurting and killing and producing terribly traumatic experiences for the people alive and their kids, but this could be passed down to Ukrainians, to Israelis, to Palestinians for generations, because of this incredible amount of horror and trauma they're experiencing.
It will be.
Like, it needs to be like a broader conversation.
Right. But the broader conversation is, how do we create collective healing and shift the story around it? Okay,
so let's go there into collective healing. Yeah. And I'm gonna tee you up here with one of your quotes. This is something I read. So, healing occurs only when an individual can access a deeper, fully experienced and expressed version of themselves, or to say, a transformation. Beautiful words. No idea what that means.
Okay. So it's kind of where we started earlier, when I said you have the intellectual roadmap. Okay. So even though I know that I should be thinking about the world differently and everything, the shoulds, right? We get stuck in the shoulds, right? So you understand intellectually. But if I don't actually do the work, right? Here, let me back up a second. How do we heal? We heal in connection. Okay, that's one of the greatest places for healing, is in connection, is in safe, healthy connection. So if I have a collective that's all they're doing is swirling around and in all of the devastation of the war, rather than we made it out the other side of it and our country is still standing and we're still whole and we're moving on. That's a different collective than the collective of, can you believe our country still is destroyed, rather than we are rebuilding and we're still standing. So the embodiment would be to be able to be over here in what I call the healing vortex versus the trauma vortex. And that's what collectively what we need to do to heal societies and heal in Israel is to bring, and I think the Israelis are really good at doing this. They are resilient.
I really love the way you worded that, because here's the beauty of the whole picture. Because you could have tunnel vision on one angle of the picture. Look what's happening to us. But the whole picture is that if it was, and I'll just put it on myself for a second because we're talking about trauma. And I know that I'm not alone, that we all had these traumatic experiences. One isolated one was that I was severely bullied in school by these girls. I could have been on Oprah. It was really bad. And so it would look like, if I look at it just like that, like, wow, this is terrible. And thank God there wasn't social media back then. I don't know if I would have survived. But big picture, when I get to see that I made it out of that, and what it caused was such a deep sense of connection and compassion for people, that I'm not just speaking intellectually about it because I read a book. I'm actually genuinely connecting with you. Like, I get you. I love you. And I have this strong sense of that. And it caused this deep peace and connection in my life. And if I needed that to springboard into that expansion. Like, it takes that contrast, that darkness, to even understand what the light feels like. And the light is the most beautiful thing to walk the earth in, that peace. But feeling that peace, it takes the darkness.
I want to add something to that, because that was beautifully said, is that it's also the piece of creating that in your relationship with yourself first, right? And that sometimes happens in the collective. You find your way back to you, but that everything you're saying is about what you need to do in relationship with yourself and that piece of connectivity.
So it sounds like this can be a collective. It can be people together, like a group think type of things, through some of the talks and classes that you guys are going to be talking about in a little bit. The other thing is, are there any other tools? And I'm kind of, we talked about this before we started recording today, so I want to be honest with my audience. What are some other tools that people have used and it's starting to be proved now, whether popular or unpopular, that help people walk through that trauma?
So are we talking about like in the collective?
I'll give you a hint. Psychedelics.
Okay. So yes, stepping into the world of psychedelics will certainly help rewire the neural pathways. Because a big piece of this, and I'm going to go back to psychedelics in a minute, a big piece of what needs to happen is that you have to change the relationship that you're having with your story. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when the trauma is unresolved, they just can't get out of, they can't do the rewiring on their own. And this is where the psychedelics do come in, and they can be really powerful. But there's a but here. It's not about just going into a psychedelic journey. It's like you have to prep the brain, and you have to get the neural pathways ready to be able to open up and be able to start shifting. It doesn't just happen through a journey. So there has to be preparation for it, and then there has to be a lot of integration afterwards, because you come into those journeys and it is open. You are open. Like, you think like the work is being able to keep that portal open. And that doesn't happen without exercising the brain and the body in those pathways.
Because in the psychedelic experience, in the medicine, we'll say, it's coming full circle. It allows us to feel that experience in our body, something that we wouldn't normally even know was possible. And then once it's felt, we can begin to implement behaviors and new habits to keep that, because now you know it's real. Now you know it exists. And then there's ways to keep it. And obviously it's not like you live life in a psychedelic experience, but it's enough of a feeling to have you have a mustard seed of hope that gives you the force or the passion to go, okay, I'm in. I'm going to do this.
It's possible. Like that, to be able to have that experience is possible, because when you're in, like we're talking, let's say specifically of MDMA, which is really a clairgenic, it's possible to break down the walls. Like the reason without the MDMA, you're living in a space where you don't fully feel safe. And what the MDMA does is it breaks down all of those barriers to safety. So in that element of, in that journey, you're fully in your own safety. And so it's like, it's starting to exercise the brain and the body in that pathway.
And isn't it beautiful that once you feel safe, that's when you can give and receive love in its most purest form?
So Ilene Smith, let's do this real quick. So I hire you. I heard about you. I think you're this incredible person. I've experienced some deep trauma in my life. I'm spiraling out of control in my life, et cetera, right? I'm a boomer. I know nothing. I don't even know what MDMA is. Psychedelics is like it's a trigger word. It scares me. How do you speak to somebody that's not in your world about possibly having these type of deep conversations that some people are like, wait, I can't even go there, you know? And then on top of that, experimenting with a tool like MDMA in order to better your life. How does that conversation go?
Well, for starters, and remember, I was sitting in a therapy room for 10 years. One of the first things that I would do with any client before we even got into any sort of process, I could spend several months just educating someone. So you have to build a safe container between yourself and the person coming in, because if they don't trust, you're never, like, there's just no possibility of getting the work done. So it's all about really building the safe container of trust and educating and meeting that person where they are. And if they're not ready, they're not ready, right? So it's just, I believe the job as a facilitator is to see where somebody is and just meet them there. We don't have to go any further.
So that makes a lot of sense. This is not something where it's like, oh, you just come in and have a little 20-minute conversation. Oh, go take this, go home, light some incense, you'll be good.
This is perfect for you and really all of us, because you call yourself black and white, but really what that is I really like to ground the information. And even if somebody's lofty and they never ground the information, it's like ground yourself. You're like out of touch. You're disconnected. So I think it's really important, that educational process, so that the mind can get on board. Like the mind has to buy it. Like, well, that really makes sense to me, because otherwise it's like whipped cream on shit. You're not buying anything. You're just
right.
It's not balanced.
Right. Yeah. And as the facilitator, you're building that trust. Right. And you said that. I mean, you have to have a framework.
But it's also the piece. There's like another little piece of it is you have to break down the defensive walls, because we all show up with defensive walls, right? We're protecting ourselves. We're all always busy protecting ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay, we get in the car, we're protecting ourselves. We're at the ATM machine, we're protecting ourselves. Whatever it is, right? We're placing an order at Starbucks, we're protecting ourselves.
I want to be with Billy on this for a second, because that's such an interesting conversation. I want to pause there, because if you really feel that, like, what would it be for you to bring your walls down? Like, let's see if you can imagine a scenario where you recognize, oh yeah, I guess I do have that. And then what does it look like, for just using our imagination, where you would enter in the same situation and go, okay, my walls are down now. What is that?
Conversations like this. I think it's conversations, and it's building trust, and it's talking through it and giving examples of people that have been able to come out the other side.
Yes, and I'm going to take it one more step further, because the reason why I'm saying it to you, pointing at you, is I feel it from myself, where there's a vulnerability involved.
100%.
It's beyond questions. It's the courage to also go, all right, here's what I here's what happened to me. Or even the vulnerability to not be buttoned up if you're angry. Like to be expressed. And that's really when our walls are down.
Yeah.
I had a small situation yesterday where I got really triggered. And normally I have to, especially because I was just about to teach this class, and I have to be really buttoned up. And the two leaders that are in this class with me, they're watching me have this breakdown. And I realized in that moment, like, wow, I never let people see this. I never, and so when normally I would stop and try to button it up, I recognized the wall in that moment. And I was like, what if you allowed yourself, and it was the perfect context, right? There was discernment. I'm not just doing it to anybody, to be loved here.
I love
so
that.
cool.
You know what? I used to work like in the corporate world and stuff. And so have you ever had a colleague that you perceive as a certain way, and then all of a sudden you go out with him for dinner, or you go out and there's a after the party, after your office party or something, and you're like, gosh, like Rick, I want this Rick. Like I've known you for 5 years, but I've never really been out of the office with you, and all of a sudden you're like this amazing dude.
Right.
Like, I want this. Why can't you be more of that? Like, it's okay to show your real self. There's so much of that happens in our society. So much of that. And I think I pride myself on being real, and sometimes I say things that might offend or might upset people, but for me, every time I do that, it's just like a little check mark on the right side of the column, because at least I'm being myself, you know? Of course, we have to have we live in a nerf society, we have to be somewhat careful, but I love just being real and showing that, like even if it's anger.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be these good things. I don't believe that side of us can fully come unleashed, and I'll call it the side of us that dances like nobody's watching, until we're able to reveal the full spectrum and stop buttoning that up. And that happens as a child as well, right? Yeah. Stop it. Oh God. All right. Don't. Yeah. You're button it up. Fix yourself. Don't do that.
Right.
And you're just now constantly buttoned up. So you don't let that out, but you also don't get to let out the free.
But you know what the problem with that is, Angela?
What?
Here's the problem, just to reel us back in. Living in this society, in this world in 2024, the problem is a lot of people, they can't accept that, and they won't accept you. We go back to that term radical honesty I always talk about. If you're really radically honest about every situation in your life, all of a sudden, I call them like the normies, like the people out there, the sheep, here I am offending, they can't accept that you have done this or think like this, even if you're not harming anyone, even if you're not offending. Well, yeah, we do.
But isn't that the ultimate?
We want to be employed. We got to pay our bills. We got mouths to feed. So we have to, in a sense, conform.
Yeah, to some degree, I think that's true. But if you're not living fully in your truth, are you living? Is my question.
Well, see, now here's something that's interesting, because I understand what you're saying, and I believe that you've gathered some level of evidence to back what you're saying, because you say it right. But there's a whole other spectrum over here that maybe it's just unknown to you. You don't know that you don't know it, that you begin to let who you really are. And I'm not saying, listen, discernment is being connected as well. Like, know who you're talking to. Don't just fly up and say shit that they're not relating to you, that you're just disconnected anyway, probably with yourself. But if we begin to walk a path in alignment with our deepest truth, that means the people that are going to judge me, they're likely going to fall away. They're likely going to go, I don't respect you, and I don't respect what you're doing or what you stand for, and you have to go. There's a rite of passage here. And then you pass through that part. But what could be on the other side of that if I keep going in my truth? And these are the greatest leaders of all time, the authentic greatest leaders of all time, right? I keep going in my truth, and I pass through the levels of loneliness and pass through the abandonment of the sheep, as you would call it. And then I begin to attract what's in alignment with that truth, because I promise you, we're like magnets, and it does exist. What's in alignment with your truth. There's what's in alignment with your mask, and there's what's in alignment with your truth. And I believe most people think that their mask is truth. They don't even know that they're mostly wearing a mask.
What's in alignment with your mask and what's in alignment with your truth? that just gave me like a visual. I see that.
Yeah.
Like sort of the fake side and the real side. We got to be a little bit sometimes over to the masky side, right? Sometimes we'd all agree. Sometimes quite literally. You used to have to wear those.
Discernment, right? It doesn't mean just because I'm not saying everything doesn't mean I'm not being truthful.
Sure. Sure.
It's almost like this certain element of really understanding what's important and what's not important here in that one. By the way, that was beautifully said.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
I'll put that in my pocket.
Yeah, put that in your pocket.
Okay.
For sure.
So I have, while we have Ilene here, I got to get to one other thing that I wrote down. I took some notes because this is obviously not, I'm learning a lot today. So this wasn't like a topic I'm well educated on, trauma and happiness, quite frankly, because I relate happiness to trauma. So another thing that you've talked about is pleasing others getting in the way of your own happiness. So I'm trying to please my boss, my partner, my dad, whoever it might be. And in turn, that's getting in the way of my own happiness. And I took it a step further. I said pleasing others, not just others, but pleasing society in general, getting in the way of your own happiness, which ties into what we were just talking about. But start with like pleasing somebody else in your life. And because you're doing that, you're not really doing you.
Yeah, if you, I mean, and this can go back into a trauma conversation. Where does that behavior start? Where do we learn that behavior? You learn that behavior as a child. If you, and this would fall into the chronic stress conversation or a traumatic childhood. If you had a parent that every time you showed an emotion, you had a narcissistic parent that saw you as an extension of themselves, that every time you cried or you had a bad thought or you were upset, they couldn't tolerate it. And so you're upset, you come home from school, or little Billy comes home from school, he's upset, and mom is like, I can't deal with this, and basically shuts little Billy down because mom believes that her child not being in a good mood is a reflection of her. So she just shuts Billy down. So what does Billy do? What Billy does is Billy comes home from school and he is dying inside. He was bullied all day, but he comes home from school. Hi, little Billy. How was your day at school? Mom, school was great. Okay, Billy. I love you, Billy. Good Billy. Okay, Billy, go do your homework.
I have chills. I really
Right?
do.
But that's what happens. So that little Billy now grows up as an adult and he gets in a relationship with Susie, and Susie, like, she doesn't like what Billy's doing, or something happens between them, and Billy just covers it up.
Wow.
He just keeps covering it up because he's been taught and conditioned that it's not okay for him to have his own feelings or thoughts. And then I can take it one step further, that Billy gets into relationship with Susie. He doesn't even know what he wants now because he's never been allowed to have the experience of himself. So he doesn't even know where he wants to go to eat or where he wants to go on vacation. Yeah. He's lost all sense of self. And that's where it all stems from. And so the idea of like, you want to heal from, they call it codependent or whatever the textbook term they use. But that is all learned behavior that started early on.
And to get love is survival.
And
so as children to receive love, that is our primal survival.
Exactly.
So it is inevitable that we're going to take on a belief that who I really am is not safe.
Right. And so if I'm going to be loved, I have to act a certain way. And
so
if
someone is watching this right now and they're saying, oh, that's me, I'm doing that in my relationship, that's also learned from your partner. In other words, your partner has experienced Billy in this way. So now Susie knows Billy in this way for 40 years. Now we got a problem because that person can't say, I've been working on myself, and from now on, you're just going to have to hear all my shit. Yeah. So, and if Susie can't deal with that, now we're starting, not trying to break up anyone's relationship, but now we're starting to talk about changing
the ecosystem.
Who your partner is.
Or changing the dynamic in the partnership ecosystem. And
Okay.
I can give you an example of this. So
Please.
I'll just talk about my own life. So in my marriage, like I showed up there. I was clearly, I was going to do everything to please my husband. And I was not taking care of my own needs. His needs came first, right? And that's textbook codependent or everything we're talking about. And then at a certain point I got resentful. And at the moment that I began to realize, and with a lot of therapy, that it was time for me to use my voice. And all of a sudden, like we're doing things one way for several years, and all of a sudden I'm like, no, I don't want to go there on vacation. I want to go here for dinner, or that's not going to work, or I'm setting a boundary. My husband's like, he was confused.
Who is this?
Who are you? Like, what happened? What happened to my easygoing, like loving wife? And there was a disruption in our ecosystem. And you know, it's if the relationship's going to work, both people have to get on board for something new. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And usually, when you have one person that is compliant to the other person and they start changing, the other person really, like, they're either going to see that this is a better way, or they're going to leave.
And coming full circle to this happiness that intrigues you, it's like, are we going to attract our environment and reality based on that mask, or attract our environment and reality based on our truth? And once we wake up to the truth, because again, we're asleep until we wake up to that, oh, I don't even know who I am or what I want. And then there's a whole journey, and who am I? And what is my truth? And you got to walk through, there's, again, a rite of passage, but courage is rewarded 100% of the time.
And it's painful too. I mean, that's the thing. When you make those changes, like the whole thing is you are going to be uncomfortable. And this is why most people don't want to do this work.
Right.
Because you have to, in order for you to move past, you have to move through. And that takes it takes a massive amount of discipline to sit in the discomfort.
So I've heard you both use the word work a bunch of times since we started this conversation. So if someone's watching and they're like me, they're like, wait, I think I have some issues here. I have some trauma. I have some things that I would like to put in the work. What do we do? What kind of thing? What do I Google? Where's my help? Like just tell me.
Where do you go? Where do
I go?
Oh, there's so many places.
Well, to be selfish. This is
be selfish. Okay,
yeah.
Read my book.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
Well, please
Great.
let us know.
The great place to start is to read the book. And I wrote the book because so many people, and I wrote it basically for somebody like me who had finally figured this out, is that so many people go to talk therapy years after years after years, and they can't fix it. And I wrote the book to try to explain that you have to have an embodied experience, and you have to understand what the trauma is. And when you can actually feel into your body, the shifts can start happening. It's not an intellectual exercise.
Okay. I want to give people like actionable items right now. So what's the book? It's not called the book.
It's called Moving Beyond Trauma.
Okay.
And it's on Amazon. It's available on Amazon.
And you know what I was going to say to that, because I typically have like a bit of a mystical side to it, but it's really true. I mean, I can tell you many people have got evidence. I've got my own. When you're ready, the path genuinely does appear. Call it out of the clear blue sky, but when you're ready, have you ever noticed that? Whenever you like have a desire about something, suddenly somebody be like, hey Billy, I wanted to talk to you about this, and you're like, what? I was just thinking I wanted to do that. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And if the teacher is a book, if the teacher is a class, if the teacher, it is available. And when you wake up, inevitably, there is going to be something that appears. Even this conversation could appear that sends people on a path of whatever that is that's in alignment to them. And there isn't just one way. There isn't, but the path is the path, and you know that path because you'll be on it, and it'll be a part of your truth, and it'll feel much different than that Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
We all know what that feels like. The mask creates Groundhog Day. No matter how high up the empire you climb, it's still this like...
Yeah. And I want to add something to that. It's never one thing. And it's baby steps, and it's peeling off layer after layer, and it's about It's about finding daily practices that are going to ultimately help you rewire your neural pathways. But it's one step at a time. There's no quick fix here.
I think it's also important that, you know, I'm the only man on the set today. As I've had stronger relationships with men, especially like from my childhood that I've grown up with, and now that we're getting a little bit more mature, they're, myself included, they're more open to these types of conversations.
Yeah.
They're more open to saying, yeah, you know what, like, my mom was really difficult on me, or my dad, you know, did you know that my dad actually was involved in this and this and this, and that's why I'm struggling in my relationship now. And you start hearing these stories from friends, and I'd like to just take a second to speak to the men out there that we have trauma too. It's okay to admit that. Like, we have emotional problems too, and it's stereotypical, right? That the man doesn't cry, the man has to do this, and the woman is more on the emotional side. I think a lot of those walls are coming down in our society. I think that's one of the positives of social media. People are able to have conversations like this and share. There's so many men out there that are dealing with deep-seated, deep shit, but they're not comfortable with sitting down with someone like you two beautiful ladies.
Well, I have some data around that because I have classes in such that with men and women. And from that, there's been such a beautiful group of men that they now have their own group, like a sublet of the class. And I've got to witness it because I talked to the guy who's in the class that leads that, and I get to kind of track it. And because men tend to be more simple, and I mean that in the most beautiful ways, the moment that they get to experience the connection and feel the acceptance and love and recognize that they're not alone, and it never even realize this deep craving of the soul to connect in that way. Because again, you're buttoned up, you're programmed, you're not supposed to do that. But once they get in the environment, these are all different types. There's not one type. There's the guy who owns the empire. There's the guy that is super spiritual. They're everywhere. Rich, not rich, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a camaraderie. And you're right, it is waking up, and it absolutely changes everything. I can't tell you what that simple connection, where there's an outlet for them to not only support others in that way, but receive that and let that support in, it literally has changed their entire trajectory.
Would you encourage that? I mean, you're talking about men.
Hell yeah.
A men's group, whatever, and men getting together in whether they're doing some hobby or activity, but also sharing some of these traumatic emotional issues with each other.
It's all about vulnerability. Like, all our healing happens in connectivity and vulnerability, and men need it too. Yeah.
I highly encourage it. And I have to black and white, I have data that shows 100% this causes happiness, peace.
I love that. This was an awesome conversation. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that we want to talk about? Anything that the people watching should be aware of, or anything else beyond the book?
We're launching a mastermind that
The Miracle
Mastermind.
Okay.
So that'll be starting in June, and
We can link all that
we
stuff.
can link all that. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Well, you're doing awesome work, and I think you probably you both have had a lot of difficult conversations in your lives with people and mentored people, and people like me that's like, I'm just dipping my little toe into this water, but I know there's something there. So I'm working through it, and I'm working on myself, and I love it. It's because of people like you.
Thank you.
Aw. Bye, everybody. Hey, everyone. We're at the Pad Lab studio in Scottsdale, your go-to for real estate and mortgages. Whether you're buying, selling, or need financing, trust their 2 decades of expertise. Visit padlabaz.com to kickstart your journey. And if you're a pro seeking a dynamic team, check out padlabcareers.com. Let's make moves with Pad Lab.